Hi, I'm Angela Hart and I'm a watercolour artist and I love to create art for kids. Today we'll be talking about this particular artwork, which is called Hungry Lizard. It's a gorgeous, stunning lizard sitting on a rock, and it's got doodles on as well. He's actually looking for his next meal, flies flying all around him. And we're going to make a bag just like this one, which I've shown in a previous video, but in this design. Now the bag kit comes like this. If you want a kit, I'm just going to show you what's inside the box. You slide the belly band off, and inside you'll see you get a matching gift card. In case of this design, this is the gift card. You'll find that the gift box is sealed with a hand embossed label, and inside here you'll have two straps which are made of good quality canvas cotton and good quality thread. This is a Gutermann thread, which is wonderful to sew with. I highly recommend it. This is the small size. It's 110 yards or a metre, and that should be enough to do several sewing projects, so you'll have some left over from that. This box is actually excellent for gifting the bag forward with your art card, and because there's very little branding on this belly band other than that it's a kids tote bag with the design mentioned, you can actually use this box to gift the bag forward. Also included in the kit, once you've gone online and chosen your label, there are a number of labels that will be included in the kit. You can have made by mummy, made by daddy, it's an awful lot of man sewers now, handmade with love, and even made by nanny look. So you would choose the label in the drop down at checkout. But let's move on to the actual business of sewing. So we'll just make a start. We get two of these panels in the kit. This one is a 12 by 12 inch. Now you can buy these panels off the website in two different sizes and two different materials. This is a duck cotton. It's easily washable, so you can keep any product that you make from these panels very clean. And speaking of which, there are tons and tons of things you can make with panels. You could make a quilt it, make a wall hanging to decorate the walls. You could make a PJ case, make it up a bit like a cushion with a zip at the top, and the people could put their PJs in there, keep them nice and tidy. You could also sew it together like a cylinder, and just gather the bottom up and put a drawstring in it and have a different style of PJ case, which would just hang on the side of the bed, be lovely. Or speaking of which, you could possibly even make a seatbelt pillow for the car, so it goes on the seatbelt, child can put their head on it. There's tons and tons of things. As I say, you can buy the panels separately also, but today let's keep on track. I'm going to start sewing the bag. So when you're sewing with panels, you can reduce the amount of measuring that you actually do, because it's all been done for you really with the design. So I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to finger press back along the edge of the printed design, and then I'm going to go in with an iron and just make that extra secure, so when you unfold it you get a clear indication of a line. Now we can use these lines for sewing. We can either sew along the line or we can use that line as a guide. It's really good practice to do, it doesn't take very long, and I'm going to do this with both panels. I've shown this in the making of the previous calf bag, so if you've already watched that video, you can fast forward this bit because you're an old hand. So there we are, I've got clear indication around the bag so that when we sew it together we're not going to accidentally have any of this white edge that's unprinted showing. So we're now going to prep the top of the bag, because we're going to turn it over and over again. So using this pressed edge at the top, I'm just now going to press another 1/4 inch. I know we lose a little bit of the design. I'm going to finger press it first, just to give us a little bit more fabric at the top. Because these panels are rough cut, sometimes you have a lot at the top and sometimes you get about 1.5 inches, which is plenty really, but in order to give ourselves a little bit more of a margin there, we're now going to turn the raw edge of the fabric onto that line, finger press, and go in with the iron and just press that more securely. And we're going to do that on both panels, and then we're going to pin it together. So I'm just about now to start assembling the bag for sewing, and I'm going to use these guidelines as a line to pin alongside, and I'm going to assemble this bag using French seams so that we can encase all the raw edges, because the bag isn't lined and you don't want any raw edges in the bag that can start fraying and making the whole project you've made look untidy. So try to keep the lines that you've used lined up in here. You might find it shifts about just a little bit. Use plenty of pins and you won't run into trouble later. I'm just going to pin along the sides, the bottom and the other side there. Worth taking your time with this. So I'm actually sewing here in my garden room or she shed. So apologies if there are any noises. You know, in the background I'm a real person with real neighbours, and I think in the last video there's a little bit of dog barking going on. I hope it wasn't too distracting. And sewing is really, sewing for your children certainly is a great way to bond with them. I think if you make something for your child, it makes them feel really special, and this is why I've designed this artwork and these products to go together as a way for you to bond with your kids. I'm sure they'll be absolutely delighted to receive a bag with your own choice of maker's labelling that they can take out and show to their friends. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure about 1/4 inch out from the edge of the design. Because we're using a French seam, the fabric's going to be effectively folded twice over. You don't want to lose too much of the design panel, because that's the special bit. So I'm just going to use these pen marks, which won't show on the outside of the bag, just to give myself a bit of a sewing guide. And you can actually go along with a straight edge and join all these lines up if you like things absolutely precise or you're not that confident. But today I'm just going to give myself an indication of where I'd like to be with the needle, and I'm just going to use these little dashes to sew this first seam together. And the other thing is you can possibly use the edge of your sewing foot here, your general purpose sewing foot, to line up to this, and you'll find that your needle is about there anyway. So do give that a go. So I've just dropped my needle down into the fabric, and I've got the needle in the central position. And I'm just going to secure the end stitches a little bit. And then I'm going to line the left-hand edge of my foot up against the printed line of the fabric. removing the pins as I go. Sewing around the edge of the bag, and at the end I'm just going to do a few extra stitches so that when I do my turning, happily the edge of the foot lines up against the edge of the print of the design again. Sometimes I get that right and sometimes I don't. I'm sure you'll do the same. I'm just allowing the turning feet of the machine to pull the fabric through. I'm not pushing it at all. Feed dogs as they're called, and again at the end I'm just going to do a few more stitches and line up the foot as I'm moving forward and sew to the end. Do remove your pins, don't sew over them. I've broken many a sewing needle taking that chance. It's really not worth it. And there we go. The first line of stitches. So I'm just now going to set the stitches in, which I think is always a good thing to do as you sew anything. And then I'm going to trim off this fabric as close to the stitching line as I can without actually cutting the stitches, because we're going to turn the bag through and encase these with the next seam. So go as close as you dare, but please don't cut the stitches. The closer you go to your stitch line, the less chance you've got of these raw edges protruding through the next seam. If you're not that confident at cutting this close and you want to leave a bit more, then your next seam will have to be a little bit deeper to adjust for that. But I think that's pretty good, and I like to take off the tiniest edge on the corners here to make for easier turning. So let's turn the bag through now using your fingers. Poke these corners through. Don't use anything sharp, obviously. I just like to use the very tip of my finger. Just to poke that through as well as you can. And then I'm going to just finger press by opening this seam up a little bit as well as you can, and we're going to press that with an iron to get it nice and flat. And as you're pressing this, the edge of the raw fabric inside will start to make a line, which you can then use as a guide. I'm just rolling this fabric between my fingers to get it, get this seam as open as I can. Obviously, if you've got a steam iron here, be very careful, because steam is quite dangerous. You can burn yourself. You don't want to do that. So keep your fingers well away from the steam. bit of a press. It's now looking pretty good. So this line here is the steam line that you made as an indicator for the next line of stitches, and I would recommend is pinning the other side of that steam line, and just pin this together. You probably don't need too many pins because it's ironed nice and flat. This fabric isn't particularly naughty, it doesn't slip and slide about, but if you're a beginner, don't be afraid of using enough pins just to secure it. You don't get any wrinkles underneath, and everything stays where it should be. And I'm going to actually aim my needle on the inside of this pressed line here to ensure that we don't get any of the white fabric showing on the outside of the bag, and doubly sure that we're not going to sew the wrong side of any of this raw edge fabric. And I think you can be fairly confident now that sewing here is going to ensure that you end up with a really well sewn bag when we're finished. So although I've pinned here, my actual sewing line is going to be this side of that pressing line, but not as quite as far out as where these stitches are, so I'm going to aim about there. So I'm just going to snip off any of these little threads where the fabric's trying to fray. You don't want to turn those into a problem later on. You want to catch those because you don't want them turning up on the opposite side of the seam anywhere. So we're just going to now do our second turn through and see how well we've done. And there we are, we've got a tiny bit of thread there that's come through, which I'm just going to pull through. That's the sort of thing you want to avoid. And I'm just again going to finger press, and then I'm going to press with an iron. All the way round our sewing seams around the bag, pressing it out fully. Put another one out, just a loose one. ahead and make any bags from this tutorial. I'd love to see them, so please do leave a comment and let me know how you've got on. I'd love to see your makes. Whether or not you're using these panel products or the kits, I'd still love to see them. This is another one there trying to make an appearance. Just keep clipping them off. So you should be at this stage now, and here we have two choices. I'm going to give you some hacks. If you feel the edge of your sewing here with the French seam, you can feel there's quite a bit of bulk. So what we're going to do, ideally, is push that seam to one side, turn the fabric, and then turn it again. Now if you feel how much fabric bulk you've got to sew through, you can see that if you haven't got a really powerful sewing machine, you may have problems. Well, a couple of hacks to get around that is you can sew, when you top stitch this bag, you can sew up to here and then just put a couple of hand stitches in, job done. Alternatively, what we're going to do is, turn the bag back through to demonstrate this, is we're going to reduce bulk using the scissors very, very carefully. Just want this fabric laying flat. So on this side of the seam, and before your pressing edge there, we've got an opportunity here just to cut away a little bit of fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my scissors and I'm just going to come down, not entirely to this pressing line, just a little bit before it, and very carefully I'm going to remove a piece of the fabric and down along just in front of this sewing line, and not quite down to that seam, and cut it off. And I'm going to do this on both sides. Turn the bag back through. Very carefully now, treating this fabric a little bit more gently. If you see the outside of the bag hasn't been affected, then we're going to just push that seam to one side and turn the fabric down, and you'll see immediately that you've got a much better chance there of getting a needle through this and not having any difficulties. And the other thing we can do is we can press, and you should do this. You might find one of these little sleeve presses useful here. I know I do. Is you're going to find your pressing line, and at this stage you're going to press this seam as flat as you can. With quite a lot of heavy pressure. Careful, that will now be hot. Then turn it in again and repeat to get that nice and flat. I'm sure you'll agree that this is quite a good thing to do. And now that feels so much flatter to me. It's a little bit of a ridge, but you've reduced it significantly. Do that both sides of the bag. So we're now going to attach the straps, and these are, in the kit you get a canvas cotton, or a cotton canvas strap. If it was a nylon strap that you're using, you could very, very carefully seal these edges from fraying by just showing them to the top of a candle like that, but you can't do that with canvas. You mustn't do that, it'd be a fire hazard. Cotton does actually burn, it doesn't melt. There, I'm going to show you, why am I saying this? Because I'm going to show you a hack. There are two ways you can actually do the handles. So the way I've sewn this kit bag is I've encased the raw edge and I've done a folding over of the strap, and I'm going to show you that on this bag in a moment. But again, that creates a little bit of bulk. My sewing machine goes through it perfectly well, and I'm sure yours will too. But if you're at all worried about it, then you could seal this edge with an overlap stitch on your machine, a zigzag stitch. There are different feet that you can use to do this with, that probably come with your machine. And you could attach your strap simply on the top like this. You may lose a little bit of the design, it may not be for you, but if you're wanting an easy hack, then you can do that and sew round in a square or an oblong and put a cross in the middle. Job done. So in a moment I'll show you how to do that, if indeed you ever want to make another bag with some printed fabric. Then there's no problem covering the front of the design. You could find it easy, so we'll do that in a moment. But I think these bags do look pretty good with the straps sewn in. So just grab a tape measure and measure the outside of the bag. About 3 inches is about right, and you're going to put raw edge to raw edge using a pin or a clip. Get the placement the same the other side, making sure that you're not twisting your strap. Just check it and double check it. Turn the bag over. Repeat. Pin it in place. That's about right. And you can see at the top of the bag that just double check that they're both in the same place and everything lines up. And I'm just going to snip that off because we don't want any problems later. I'm just going to now tack that strap onto the bag just at the upper edge, just to secure it, so that when I'm turning it, it's not going to be naughty and move out the way. Do a few securing backwards and forwards stitches here. It will help strengthen the strap. So as you can see, these canvas straps will fray quite a bit. You can use a foot just like this. You see it's got a bar in the middle. You can probably buy this to go with your machine, or it may well have come with it when it got it. This machine is a brother, and I'm using the foot that's got a G on it, and I'm going to use stitch 6, which is a zigzag stitch. It goes, so what happens is the needle will go through the fabric on this side and to the outside of the fabric on that side, but clearly we're doing it along there. We'll go like that. It's a bit difficult to show on that side, so I'm just going to change my foot over. Drop the needle, choose my stitch, and it does 2 stitches on the fabric and 1 stitch over that bar, and then secures. now when you trim quite close to get that part that's already frayed off and remove that, when you pull like that, you'll get very, very little fraying, and you can just keep trimming it back, avoiding those stitches over and over again until that fraying stops. And I think you'll be fairly sure that that edge of the webbing is going to stay neat if you're sewing it on top of any bag. So it's just a little free top tip for you. So here we are dealing with the top of the bag. This is the time really to remember to sew in your maker's label. If you've got one to hand or you're buying a kit, obviously it'll come included. And today I'm going to use Handmade with Love. Just keep that to one side. So we're now going to start turning the bag. So this handle is going to be pushed one time and then turned again for a second time. And then I'm going to get it straight and use a pin just to secure it ready for sewing, because we're going to top stitch the bag here and here. And if you'd like to do a cross for extra security, you can, as I don't normally bother. I mean, this bag is for a child. They don't often have really super heavy items in their bags, just sandwiches or a book or toys, or helping mummy with a loaf of bread when shopping and such like. I'm going to turn on the edge there and secure that. Do need to use quite sharp pins. I'm going to go all the way around the bag very carefully, making it nice and neat as I go. Try not to stick myself with the pins. That's not a new one. There's that. Let's get a nice new pin. Just ease it through. It's looking pretty close to being finished now. Take a look at it, give it a bit of a check if everything's looking good. And this is the time to pin in your label. Line it up. Just going to trim that so it's showing the full words. Again, these are rough cut in the kit. Then I'm just going to place that in the seam where I want it, keeping it nice and straight edge to edge, and put in a pin there. I can either do it inside or out, so I'm going to do it out. And you should actually hear the sewing machine needle going through that. It makes a slightly different sound to know that you're capturing that label in your seam. And all that's left to do now is top stitching here and top stitching here, and using your fingers to make sure that you're capturing that bottom edge as you go along with the sewing machine. Straighten out your fabric, ready to go, drop the needle and off we go. Not too fast, just secure those stitches to start. Go nice and slowly, removing the pins as you go, keeping the strap straight. And straight in now. Second set of top stitches. I'm lining my needle up on the outside edge of the foot here. Works out very well for me with the depth of the turn that I've made with this bag. So I'm going to continue to use that to make sure my top stitching is as neat as I can possibly get it. Any professional sewist would tell you, always use a brand new needle for every project as well. I think if you're using an old needle that you've used for many other projects, it won't be quite as sharp. You love the design. I'm sure any one of your children would love to receive a personalised bag like this, and I look forward to seeing you again next time.